everyone, and welcome to the Dear Dyslexic podcast series. I'm your host, Shae. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which I live and work, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and to pay my respects to elders past and present. This podcast is proudly sponsored by ADSET, the Australian Disability Clearinghouse on Education and Training. ADSET is a national resource that aims to promote discussion, dissemination of information and advice that informs educators, disability practitioners and students with disabilities on inclusive education, teaching and support within the Australian education and vocational training sectors. We are so excited to be launching our 50th podcast. With over 25,000 downloads worldwide, our podcasts continue to be a valuable resource to our growing community. This is a special edition podcast from our Living Successfully with Dyslexia 2021 conference. I had a roundtable conversation with Autumn O'Connor, Tammy McGowan and Dr. Rebecca Flower on neurodiversity in the workplace. Together, these women brought a variety of insights into the challenges of being neurodiverse, but also the strengths that we can bring to the workplace.
I would like to welcome our panellists today, Autumn O'Connor, Rebecca Flower and Tammy McGowan, who are all here to talk about neurodiversity in the workplace. So thank you, ladies, for coming along this afternoon.
Thank you.
If you could just give a little bit of a background to who you are and where you work. So Tammy, Autumn, sorry, I can see you first. So are you happy to kick off?
Yeah, I can do that. So I'll just start. Okay, so my name's Autumn and I am dyslexic and dyscalculic, and I have a diagnosis of autism. I also think I might have dyspraxia because I've been doing a lot of research on dyslexia recently, and it's like, hey, that looks a lot like me. So that's interesting. When I grew up, I didn't really get any help for dyslexia. In my family, it was sort of shunned, it was sort of rejected. But when I look at kids now, you know, there are a lot more supports for young people today. So I think that's really fantastic. My area of work is in personal and professional development education. And I lead a team of about 20 to 25 neurodivergent people, including dyslexics. And we co-create this curriculum for our neurodivergent peers. So that's sort of what I do.
Thank you, Autumn. Yeah, that's fantastic. Rebecca?
Hi, so I'm Rebecca Flower. I am a lecturer in the Department of Psychology and Counselling at La Trobe University. I'm located at the Bendigo campus. I have ADHD. I was just diagnosed about 2 years ago. And I'm still learning a lot about myself, about my neurodiversity. And like Autumn, actually, I think that I also probably have dyspraxia, but I find it really challenging to find information about dyspraxia in adulthood. I'm a teaching and research lecturer, so I teach a lot about and research autism. I'm kind of expanding that to look at ADHD also, and I supervise and work with a lot of students who are neurodivergent, including students with dyslexia, and who are autistic, have ADHD. And so learning about this whole area with regards to working with adults, teaching adults, researching adults and the needs of adults is really interesting to me. And my area of research particularly is relating to equity of access to the workplace. And so, yeah, that's me. Thanks for having me today. I look forward to talking to you all again.
Thank you for coming on. And Tammy, how are you?
Good, thank you. And thank you for having us here, Shae. So hello, everybody. My name is Tammy McGowan. I am a late diagnosed autistic, ADHD, dyslexic, dyscalculic. I have auditory processing disorder and multiple chronic health conditions. I am also a parent to 2 neurodivergent young adults. I'm one of the many adults who have been diagnosed later because I appear to have a more subtle presentation of dyslexia in particular. I was an avid reader as a child, and I think that even though my father and brother are dyslexic, I got skipped for the reason that I appeared to love books so much, and I wasn't a disruptive child either, so I got missed. I run a small business. I am working with different contracts, working with autistic people to design resources and programs. I work with employers to create accessible places, and I also facilitate training for teachers and parents of autistic kids.
Thank you, Tammy. And what fascinates me and what we've spoken about throughout today is the number of adults that get diagnosed later in life, which all of us have that experience of. So we've had the privilege and opportunity of speaking before around some of our workplace experiences. Beck, do you want to start us off on some of the experience you've had?
Absolutely. So I started working very young, which now I think about it potentially contributed to my, I guess, really late or recent diagnosis of ADHD not being picked up when I was younger. I started working at 14. I worked in fast food and hospitality for many years. So I worked in fast-paced roles that were challenging, had a lot of change, a lot of, I guess, mental stimulation, and where I could kind of work around my challenges, but also that used up a lot of my energy. It wasn't until when I started university, I also was working in hospitality at the same time. And when I did my PhD, I think I had about 10 casual jobs. So I guess quite clearly looking back, I was neurodivergent. I needed a lot of stimulation, but at the time, no one picked up anything. And I think keeping busy kept me occupied and looking like I was performing, but really it was at the detriment, I suppose, of my own mental health and looking after myself. I was just busy all the time. It wasn't until I really had a job that requires sitting all day where I noticed that something was different and that it was a bit of a challenge for me to have a 9-to-5 job. So for many years, I also realised I had a lot of challenges with particular areas and thought that perhaps it was just due to my intellect. Perhaps I wasn't as smart as others. Perhaps I didn't take on information as quickly as other people. But as I learned more about ADHD and other areas of neurodivergence, I think it's actually that I learn in a different way, that I have different needs to non-neurodivergent people. And so it's been really useful to me to find what works and to be able to adapt my workplace to my needs. I'm fortunate now to work in a job where I'm working off campus. I have a lot of flexibility with regard to working location and managing my own schedule, which is excellent in the sense of being able to self-direct my time and work with my energy flow and take breaks to be able to keep my brain stimulated. I have a lot of deadlines. I have a lot of challenges. There's a lot of novelty that works really well for an ADHD brain. But I also have a lot of time optimism, which means that I think I can get a lot more done than I can. So I guess for me, it's been really useful learning about neurodiversity, and I think I still have a lot more to learn. But I can quite clearly see, looking back, how my neurodivergence changed the way I work and really impacted me in the workplace. And I guess that just makes me more passionate about understanding more about the different areas of neurodiversity and how we can better help employers understand that, but also better help adults understand their needs, how they learn, instead of just self-blaming.
And we all had a bit of a laugh when you said that you take on more than you should, and that your timelines, you feel like you can get a lot more done. And I don't know for the rest of our panel, but I know for me that I'm always overcommitting and at the 11th hour frantically trying to get things ready. Autumn, have you felt that way?
With trying to get a lot more done than you think you can do. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, I certainly get that. I find that for me that it feels like there's multiple things going on. So because I have autism and dyslexia, in a way I have issues and benefits on both sides. So I have issues with organizing how I'm supposed to put thoughts into order, particularly for written materials, and I'm an editor, so I should be able to do that. So, but then I also am very good at that. So at times it can be, it's sort of unpredictable, I guess. At times my autism sort of comes to the fore and I use all those amazing strengths and I can really get things done. And other times my dyslexia is coming up and can kind of get in the way of things and make me feel really scattered in terms of being able to concentrate. And certainly I think what works best though is just being kinder to myself and not trying to push on deadlines. So something that my partner actually came up with, which I follow now, is to triage my tasks because I get a lot of emails. I don't know if you all experience that, but I get a lot of emails, a lot of little small little admin type jobs that I need to do, and they all take a lot of time. So if you spend your day just doing admin, it can take the whole day and you haven't really done anything. Like, yes, you've answered emails, but you haven't really done any of your work that's piling up. And so the triage system is to go for the biggest or most important task first, and then I can break it up by doing a little bit of admin. So if I do, say, 10 minutes of admin every morning, by the end of the week, I would have achieved all of it without ruining my whole day and getting lost behind things.
Thank you. I think that's really important, especially because it feels like when someone sends you an email, you have to respond straight away. You know, even if it's at 9 o'clock at night, you know, there's this notion now that there's instant, we want everything instantly and everything answered instantly. And so having a strategy like that, I think, can be really helpful in managing time. Tammy, how have you felt? Because you listed a number of different labels when you introduced yourself, and we've had a lot of conversations around labels today, but how do you manage in the workplace with so many neurodiversities, differences, difficulties, whichever word you'd like to pick today?
Look, it's a great question. With my particular brand of neurodivergence, sometimes I'm not really sure where one diagnosis blends into another. I was diagnosed with autism first as an autistic, and then I was diagnosed as an ADHDer, and I got the combined type, which is awesome and funny to me, that I am both unable to concentrate but also hyperactive.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. The D Hub is our digital learning space where you can access our first Australian e-learning courses for those working and supporting dyslexic employees, as well as webisodes, online courses, communities of practice, and much, much more. So head to the D Hub today and start your learning journey. dhub.dedyslexic.com.
I thought, well, you know, I've been tested for all of that. I may as well find out why I can't do numbers and why I have trouble remembering instructions and this really uneven, spiky skill set. And so then I paid for the full dyslexia assessment, and I was expecting to have dyscalculia, but because I could read, I wasn't expecting to also have quite a severe presentation of dyslexia. And so all those things that I've put up with my entire life, like having to reread a sentence 3 times because it's not sinking in, and typing backwards, not being able to mirror, not being able to copy dance steps, not being able to catch a ball. There's so many things that go with all of that. And it was during that assessment that the specialist said, did you know that you've got sensory processing disorder and auditory processing disorder? And I was like, well, no, actually, awesome. And so then I went to our local deaf society for a full audiology assessment and discovered that, in fact, can't hear much at all without a hearing aid support. And so I thought, well, I've made it to the grand age of almost 48 years old with that spiky skill set that Beck was talking about and that so many people have talked about today, that feeling of, why am I so good at some things some of the time and really unable to do any of these things, especially when I really want to. And I can, so yesterday I gave I do say so myself, a pretty good business presentation, but then I was unable to remember my 4-letter PIN code. Couldn't get it, no chance. And I was just like, wow. I just gave a business presentation. So I know we've talked today about imposter syndrome, you know, thinking, how did I get here without everybody realizing that I'm like completely incapable if they give me too much to do? And also very much relating to autumn with that need to be productive, to be busy, which we all talk about the overcommitment, but also I think that there's a lot of trauma in growing up and not understanding why you're different to other people. and that we do feel this pressure of people telling us that we're not trying, or that we are not applying ourselves, or we're not interested, and you're so good at this, why can't you do that? Again, that spiky skill set. And everyone's talking about this all day. And so because of that sort of trauma response, we've learned to gather our self-esteem around how productive we are and how much we're doing. And so I think it's a compensation thing that we all pack in as much work as we can to show people that we're capable and we're doing this, and look at us go. And then we collapse underneath. So, I've worked in most sectors. I've worked in all the community service sectors now, except for the elderly. Now working for myself, it's been the best possible environment because I can meet my sensory needs without having to engage all day in any kind of open plan nightmare, or water cooler talk nightmare, or remembering what your colleagues' children's names are, or, I can actually just focus. So
that all resonated with me, and it makes me a bit anxious about going back into the workplace and having to remember those. It's remembering the names that really get me. I'm really good at faces, but not names. Thank you all for sharing a bit of your experiences within the workplace. I think, it'll resonate with a lot of people that have attended today. We've had a lot of dyslexic attendees or people with learning disabilities, and I think this will be a really important discussion for them to hear. And we've touched a little bit on some of the challenges in the workplace. Were there any other challenges that you thought were important to raise, particularly for people that are employing or working with dyslexic or neurodiverse employees? Beck, was there anything else?
I was just reflecting on a comment that I think Autumn made about email, and how it kind of relates to what Tammy said as well, actually. I think that sometimes email is a part of so many of our jobs these days, and like Autumn said, we can be so reactive if we just respond to email all day. But I think it gives us a bit of a sense of control and can make us feel productive. And like Tammy said, we feel this need often to show I'm productive, I can do this. And I think it's a bit of a challenge. It's this working between this, I have needs, I work differently to other people, and adaptations really help me. But at the same time, I'm great. Please keep me on as a really good employee because I'm excellent. And I think that's why we just push ourselves to these limits. One strategy that I found helpful for myself, but also working with students who are dyslexic or have ADHD or who are autistic, and colleagues as well, is that it is a bit awkward at the start, but once we work on it, it's really helpful, is discussing communication needs outright. So if I'm working with a new team or a new student that I'll be working relatively closely with, and of course this isn't possible in all jobs, but in lots of jobs, it's just having this clear discussion about what are your communication preferences, what are your communication needs, and can we find a way to work together that meets all of our needs? And so one of the things that I talk about is allowing time to respond to emails. So I generally talk about leaving 2 business days for emails, and if it's something urgent, we discuss it over phone. These rules can change based on whatever team, but it means that instead of thinking I need to be sitting on email all day and replying, knowing that people I'm working with know I need some time to reply because I'm focusing on other things. And I also let them know that, and of course this will change per job, but in my job there's often, I guess, a huge workload, and sometimes an expectation we will work outside of traditional working hours because we have flexibility. And so I let people know I won't be emailing on the weekends. I let students know that too. And that's been quite helpful because I guess it gives some clarity around and boundaries around this is what I need to, I guess, feel comfortable in the workplace and to communicate with you openly. And I found that helps build relationships, but also takes away some of the pressure associated with email and allows time to focus on those big things so that I can better triage my work time, like Autumn said too.
That's a really great suggestion. That's not only practical for a neurodiverse staff member, I think that for every staff member, they can implement a strategy like that because, I mean, for me, having that little red dot causes a lot of anxiety that I've got to get something done. Yeah. Where for my partner, he'll have 400 emails. So, everybody works so differently. And I think being able to have some of those boundaries, because sometimes we're not very good at putting boundaries in place, can be really important. in the workplace. Were there any other challenges that anyone else wanted to raise that they've noticed, Autumn, particularly because you work with a lot of neurodiverse staff as well?
Yeah, I think something that I personally find a challenge, but I've also noticed in my staff as well, is asking for help. Yeah. So it might be something that everybody struggles with. It might not just be a neurodivergent issue, but I've noticed it specifically in this population and with myself as well that, and I think Becca touched on this a bit, you want to be seen as capable and you want to be seen as someone who can achieve things, but also have your employer not think that you're unable to do things because you're showing a weakness. Essentially, the challenge is knowing when it's too hard or too difficult or doesn't have enough instructions or you just don't have the time because either you planned poorly or because there's too much work and you shouldn't have said yes. But basically knowing when you can't do it and then asking for help. That's one of, I think, the biggest challenges. And I wonder, I don't have the answers here, but I wonder if the reason why it's a challenge is because there is this incredible fear that comes with expressing that you can't do something. And maybe it's a stigma, or maybe we think that we're going to be judged too harshly because we say that we can't do it or we need help. So that I think that's actually what restricts people in asking the help. And then, of course, as I'm sure we've all experienced, if you don't ask for help and you really did need help, the problem is like a snowball. It goes downhill and it collects more and more snow. And before you know it, it is like, something that could have been this tiny little, hey, I just need help, becomes this overwhelming thing, sweeps you up and you're gone. You're rolled over the top with the giant snowball. If you bring it to your employer or your boss at that point in time, then they will think you are incompetent and incapable. So it's sort of knowing when is the right time to bring a problem and feeling confident that you can say you can't do it or you need help. So the only way that I've managed to work this through myself is to try to remember that I'm not Superwoman. I'd like to think I am. I'd like to think I'm fantastic, but I'm not.
You are. Yes, you are.
So I need to sort of exercise a bit of humility, and I also need to just be aware of my humanness, I guess you could say. There'll be days when I'm tired, there'll be days when I'm confused, there'll be days when I'm scattered, and all of these things could be completely unrelated to my neurodivergence. It could just be life. It could be life with a baby. That's what I think is going on. But it could just be life, and other people's lives are affected in this way too. They also struggle in different ways. So with my staff, I've said, hey, just if there's a problem, just bring it to me and you won't be penalized. Yeah, that's how I practice, because they come to me. It doesn't mean that sometimes I'm a bit frustrated when something, needs extra work, or I need to find someone to help them. But that's more of, I guess, an organizational thing on my side. But I would love to, if anyone on the panel has ideas of how do we overcome this problem of asking for help and being okay with, I guess, our vulnerability and weaknesses, or just recognizing that we don't have enough time and we can't do it.
Yeah. I'd love to speak to that, if it's all right.
Yes, please.
As I was saying earlier, most of us, I don't believe anybody who has a disability or is neurodivergent gets to adulthood without experiencing some significant trauma. And a lot of our fear of other people's responses is based on actual experiences from childhood and up, of where we have been made to feel unworthy, incapable, like we're not meeting our potential. And this is for, because I really want to highlight that people with intellectual disability can also have dyslexia. People with all disabilities have dyslexia. But because we're not treated as individuals when the diagnosis is talked about, it makes it hard to remind people that we are all just human. I think sometimes the fear is that if we're asking for help for something that we've already had help for, then it looks like we have tried. then it looks like we're lazy, and it's hard to explain to someone, I know you've gone through this with me 3 times, but I haven't seen it for 4 weeks and now I've forgotten because my brain didn't store it. I also think that there's something really, really important in there, Autumn, about us being human, and that we deal with a lot of the same stress and pressures as people who are not neurodivergent. And in workplace especially, I think that a lot of people who are not dyslexic could relate to a lot of the things that we struggle with at some level. But if people can imagine that we're experiencing those things, but it is amplified, significantly amplified to a clinical level where we meet a diagnostic criteria. So people might be able to relate to, I'm having trouble concentrating because I didn't get enough sleep, or I'm having trouble remembering my login because, you know, I'm feeling unwell. But for us, this is a constant issue that we always have to create workarounds. And I've mentioned before the example of Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire dancing, and that they were both considered incredible dancers, but Ginger had to do everything that Fred did backwards and in stilettos, and he's probably the known dancer. And I think that it's like that for those of us that are neurodivergent. We are experiencing all the same pressures and stress that everyone in the workplace is, but then we have that added on top. And because we know that sometimes we might mispronounce words or lose words or not be able to recall a fact or not be able to do something, especially watching us, we live with that extra adrenaline and like anxiety about, you know, how that's going to be. And if you add on top of that, that a lot of us have co-occurring disabilities, and that dyslexia is not the only diagnosis for a lot of us. And a lot of us are really impacted by our sensory environment at work as well. Background noise, disorganised environments, open office, smells, pain, other things that we're dealing with on top of that. And so, you know, for some of us, literally every little bit of energy that we've got, we've probably used just getting to work. And then we're just sitting at a desk completely depleted while all these expectations are coming at us, and we can't tell anybody because we don't want people to think that we don't belong there. And then we don't want to ask for help because we've already asked for help. So, yeah, sorry, long answer.
No, thank you, Tammy. There was so much that we could unpack in what you said. And I think it was a really nice way of explaining, you know, that everybody has workplace stress, and then we have this additional, because I have this discussion with my partner all the time. He says, what about the non-neurodiverse? My brain's starting to slow down. I can't think of the word we normally use. He says, what about us? And, you know, I get tired too, and I get this. And so that was a really nice way of explaining how, yes, you do, but there's an added layer of complexity for us that we have to manage as well. So thank you for explaining it in that way. I think that was wonderful. We've talked a lot about the challenges, and you all know that I could talk about those a lot. There's so many different things we could unpack around the challenges in the workplace and day-to-day living. But today we've heard a lot about people's strengths and successes. And I would sometimes worry that when we focus a lot on the successes, that for some people that have dyslexia that are neurodiverse, they may feel, well, I'm never going to be like that, or that's just not me. I'm never going to be an academic, or I'm never going to do my doctorate, or, you know, I just want to be able to read to my child, or to be able to interact with my child's friends. Or how can we talk about the strengths in a way that encourages people to see the best of themselves, do you think, without them feeling like they're inadequate compared to another neurodiverse person, like Richard Branson, for an example? I'm never going to be Richard Branson. One, because I'm not male, but two, because that's just not me. So how can we encourage strengths that are focused within us, but yeah, we're not comparing ourselves to the rest of the neurodiverse population?
One of the things that I do when I meet people, particularly if I'm presenting on being autistic, is I just lower everyone's expectations on me up front and explain that I'm very average. I'm not gifted, I'm not a savant, I can't count matchsticks, I'm hopeless at art. I can't dance or sing. I don't have perfect pitch hearing. I am so ordinary, okay? But what my strengths are is that because I've had to think differently than other people and I didn't have any basis for that of why, I've become quite resilient. I am like a dog with a bone trying to learn how to do something. I get so excited and passionate and connected to the work, particularly if I'm interested in it. And I can make connections that other people can't. And I know previous speakers have talked about this, that having that different lens means I see things that other people in the room aren't going to see. And sometimes that's the missing bit for people that I see. So as many challenges as I have, I also love when I have that flow of creative thought and energy. And I like thinking differently to other people most of the time. There is, I'm just scared of using the word gifts because it doesn't really feel like you're unwrapping a Prezi when you can't remember something, but
or you can't read it.
we definitely do each individually have skills that we have developed to do that thing that everybody else could do automatically, and we had to manually train ourselves to do it.
Yeah, that's a really nice way of putting it, Tammy. I also I'm really upfront with people when I'm talking to people about, well, I guess for me, I'm thinking when I'm giving presentations, particularly when I'm talking to students, I'll just let them know, and I suppose this is a privilege that comes with working in the area and conducting research in the area, that I can feel a little bit more comfortable talking about being neurodivergent, because I know that's not as comfortable for everyone in the workplace. But I feel that I can be a little bit more open and becoming more confident with time as I understand more about my neurodivergence. You know, I'm a bit much sometimes. I think a student feedback was, she's a bit much. I am, but I can't do a lot about that. So, you know, I'm going to do my best, though, to teach you about the subject content, and I'm really passionate, and I think that can be quite helpful. But sometimes I go on tangents. Sometimes I talk a little bit too much about myself. I'm doing this as a way to try to relate to the content, not to be kind of self-absorbed. I do mix up words sometimes, and if you need clarity, please let me know. And I guess coming back to what Autumn mentioned before, I try to let people know that, you know, if things aren't clear, that's on me as a supervisor, not on them, and that hopefully that encourages them to ask for clarity a little bit more. I try to encourage people to, you know, student staff that I'm working with reflect on their communication needs and their preferences, and I think that's helpful. But I think, you know, with regards to thinking about our strengths as neurodivergent people, it can be just really helpful to self-reflect. Like Tammy said, you know, there's all these things where, you know, there's a lot of, there's challenges. You know, I tried to heat up something before and it was frozen, and my husband said, "What are you doing? It's quite clearly wasn't cooked yet." And I thought, well, you know, it was so simple, but to me, I thought, I think I was bored. I didn't want to wait any further. And I just now have to have a bit of self-compassion and have a bit of a laugh and think, oh, yeah, that's so ADHD of me. Or I call my mistakes the ADHD tax sometimes. I'm sure that could be applied to lots of things as a way to kind of lighten it up and have a bit of self-compassion. Like Autumn was saying before, a bit of you know, recognize our humanness. But then that also, with that, when you're thinking about those things that you do that are a bit different to everyone else, instead of just pinpointing the challenges, I try to reflect on if I'm doing something different to someone else and think, oh, that's interesting, and what that means for me. And I guess what I notice in it, working with a lot of students with dyslexia or students who are autistic or have ADHD, is this oversensitivity to the world, which is often seen as a negative thing. But I actually think it means that people are quite in tune with the world and what's going on. And that can be really helpful, I guess, particularly because I'm working with a lot of students who might be future psychologists. They can pick up things from other people quite nicely. They think outside the box. They can see these patterns, like you mentioned, Tammy, can see these relationships and patterns that other people can't see. And I think without self-reflection, sometimes neurodivergent people don't know that not everyone can do that. And also, like you mentioned, Tammy, are really solution-oriented and great creative problem solvers. There are these strengths, and I think sometimes in working through our challenges, we just miss the strengths. We don't know that they're strengths. We think that everyone does them, but we might do them a little bit better or a little bit differently. And so I guess just encouraging a bit of self-reflection about what you do differently and how they're great things, and where there's challenges, are there workarounds that you can come up with? And instead of being ashamed that you need the workaround, have a bit of self-compassion and use that problem-solving creativity to come up with an interesting workaround for yourself instead of judging yourself for needing the workaround.
I love those messages of self-care and self-compassion. I think they're so important as we manage day-to-day and working life. Autumn, from your opinion, not just your strengths, but what you see in your workplace with your team members, how do you bring out the best in them?
Practice builds mastery. And this is something that I think is really, really important to teach anyone, kids for sure, but adults as well. For example, my partner is a brilliant artist, amazing. I think he's fantastic. But he says the only reason he's good at being an artist to that level is because he spends hours and hours every day for many years to build that skill. Now, and I think art is a really good example because art, in some ways, there are artists who just have it, whatever it is, and there are artists who may not have it but are still skilled. So you might have a particularly good eye for color or shape or form, and then you practice and practice and practice and practice, and you become an amazing sculptor, yeah? You may not have any of those skills, but then you practice and practice and practice and become an amazing, say, photorealist, someone who can do that look very real. And I think this, whether we think of art or other areas, is sort of important to be aware of, is that people who we consider masters, who we consider fantastic and brilliant at that thing that they do, whatever that quality or strength is, most of them haven't just woken up one day and been brilliant at it. It's not like you just roll out of bed in the morning and suddenly you are an Olympian, like you're getting gold medals for cycling. No, it's because you've been cycling every day in your team, in the rain, you're actually, you're working on it. And well, you might sit here and listen to me and say, well, I've got really bad dyslexia and I can't actually do things. I want to be a writer, but I can't be a writer because I can't write. Yeah, I can see that. But there's also you may not become an amazing novelist, but you will improve if you just practice. And it sort of is something that I think is hard to hear, because I think when we look at other people who are very skilled, who have all these brilliant talents, is that we then think and assume that they just had it. They just were amazing. They just were savant, or they didn't have to work. But everybody works to wherever they get to. It's something you have to work on. So with my writers, one of them who started with me 3 years ago, when they started with me, they had a creative writing degree, so they were fantastic at writing anyway. But then when they started writing, it wasn't really related to our house style. Yeah, it was very personal. It was flowery. It was very nice, almost poetic at times. And it really irritated me, because it wasn't the right style. But what I did was kind of, I guess, coach them and help them to bring that style, that floweriness, that sort of special, unique way of looking at the world that they had into the style that I wanted for the work. Yeah, it's a bit more academic, it's a bit more research, the research is applied to the topic, and now they are one of our best writers. And I think it's as a, from an employer point of view, looking at your staff, the key here is to find out the things they are good at. As the employer, when you look at them, you can actually identify this quite easily. If you manage a team, you'll know who has the strengths and where their strengths are. And then you just develop them. And if you kind of think, well, they're here and I want to bring them over there, then just try to find the way that you can slowly get the two elements of each part that knit it together. So for example, with the writer, yes, he was already doing writing, amazing writing, but it was a bit too flowery. But that showed me that he could think really creatively about how he writes. So what I did was teach him how to access materials like more academic materials, and then said, hey, have a look at this and see if you can apply some of that creativity to understand the topic better. So I think in that way you take what little good they have, or the little element of this is really amazing. And then you bring that to where you'd like it to be. And it might seem a bit challenging just in this sort of, abstract concept that I'm saying, but if you are a manager, you'll be able to see this in your workers for sure. If you're looking at it in yourself, the best way to do it, particularly if you have a bit of negative self-talk and doubt going on, is to get someone, a third party, to look at you and critique you in a loving way, like a therapist or a partner or a very close friend or someone in the community that you trust. It could be your priest as well if you're religious. So there are options for people to look at you and say, yeah, you actually have this skill and you can develop that and you can get some form of mastery. And it could also just as well be a skill that is perhaps considered in a workplace, may not be considered as much of a skill. I don't know. But I mean, something like empathy, something like understanding someone. There was some really interesting research talking about parents who understand, or what is it? Parents who seek to communicate with their child in the way their child communicates actually have a better relationship with their child, and the child has less issues growing up in social situations, in understanding themselves, a lot of incredible benefits. And the thing that you're looking at there is how your child communicates. So it's not how I communicate, putting that onto my child, but I'm looking at how my child communicates, and I'm trying to understand them. And by understanding them, I'm able to communicate with them better. And then by them communicating better with me, they can communicate better with others in the world. And I think that kind of paints this idea of the skills that we want to develop and the strengths. Is everyone following that?
Yeah.
Yes, and I think that, you touched on some strengths that becoming more and more necessary in the workplace, so that empathy, that emotional intelligence. And I think your analogy of the working with the child and the parent was a really nice way of summing it up. All those strengths you've mentioned are so important in the workplace. One question is, was getting a diagnosis helpful?
Overwhelmingly so.
Yes.
Definitely. One of the things that I say to people who question about, is there any point getting a label, or is the label helpful? We know we're different. We actually know. We know as soon as we start seeing other children being able to do things that we can't do, and we know when we're doing really well at things that other people can't do, like someone previously talking about blitzing people at chess. But we know that we're not the same, okay? And so people give us labels, and some of them are really unflattering. And so having an explanation is what a label is. It's not saying, right, that's it, you're a sandwich. It's saying this is why you are, wow, that was a vague kind of thing, sorry, a squirrel. It's saying this is why you're having these difficulties. Let's talk about how your brain works, and now let's start using it to your advantage, as opposed to you are not perfect, you are an imperfect human.
It helps you instead understand who you are, how you work, how you operate. I think I agree with everything you said, Tammy. Every day I learn something new about myself. Every hour I feel like I learn something new about myself. It's helped me have much more self-compassion. Instead of being annoyed at myself or doubting myself, I think, oh, that's interesting. What's a workaround for that challenge I just had? Or like I said before, I kind of can laugh about it a little bit and think, oh, that's very common, because now I know there's a community of people who share these challenges with me. I can't overstate the usefulness of the diagnosis for me. It helps me in the way I teach. It helps me approach inclusive teaching in a different way. I think I can be a much more inclusive educator. It's unbelievable to me how useful the diagnosis was, I suppose, as an adult.
And sorry, can I add in there too, it's also really helped my relationships with my friends, with my husband, and with my children, who are also mostly neurodivergent, because there are things that we do that can be frustrating for other people, and other people frustrate us too. But having an explanation for why we do things and offering ways to support us so that it's less frustrating for everybody improves everyone's relationship.
Can I add to that, Tammy, that one of the things that I found most helpful So yes, I thought my getting a diagnosis was good, and for me it was autism late. It helped me because all that negative self-talk, all those horrible things that I told myself that I was stupid, can't do this, all these also really horrible words and labels, they weren't true. So a lot of this stuff comes from childhood. A lot of it comes from what you intuit that teachers are thinking about you growing up as well. And sometimes the teachers do say horrible things, at least they did when I was growing up. And, report cards, lazy and can't figure it out, not very good at maths, and, just not thinking, not trying, that sort of stuff. And it's like, well, hang on, I know I was trying. It gave me this ability to go, no, that self-talk, I'm stupid. I'm not stupid. I have dyslexia and autism, and together it's just made it hard for me to process certain things. So I'm not stupid. And even though I struggle with it every day, it is to make sure I don't say that I'm stupid, but I do have that reminder of, no, it's your diagnosis. You just need to kind of chill and accept this. And so, yes, it's great getting diagnosed as an adult, but I think, gosh, if you got a diagnosis as a kid, yay, because that means you can jump on real quick to stop that negative self-talk and get that understanding,
I agree. And I think the more we learn from people with lived experience, so thanks for having us all here, Shae. I know I don't have dyslexia, but talking about neurodiversity in general as well, I think is helpful. The more we hear from people with lived experience, the better we understand the nuances, the things that help, the things that don't. So I think from looking at the research literature, we still have a very poor, I think, understanding of the needs, the daily life experiences of people, particularly with the dyslexia literature, ADHD literature. Autism literature is maybe a little bit more advanced, but still a long way to go before we really have a good picture of what's going on and how best to support people with lived experience. So it's great to hear from people with that lived experience like yourselves.
Thank you, everyone, for being so honest and open with that question. I think we've got time for just one more question. What can be done to educate Australian businesses? And I think, as I was leading to before, we encourage employers to look at and how can we support them?
I would like to propose we need more programs for dyslexia into workplaces. So we have a lot at the moment. There's a lot of big push to have autism pods and autism programs in the workplace. And if you're autistic, get a job. Cybersecurity is very big, and there's a lot of options there. But what about something for a dyslexia program? The benefits of a dyslexic person are actually quite wide. The being creative, thinking differently, being very good usually at very spatial things, being able to move stuff around your head and seeing things very visually. There's a lot of great opportunity there. And I think it would be lovely if we could get a dyslexia program, and the supports being someone to support and buddy system the dyslexic workers in a way that will support them. I would love to see that. I will see if our business can do it, but I would love to see that. And I think in terms of educating is, just getting more of the lived experience out there, getting people like Beck here in research, but, getting researchers to do research where they actually look at lived experience and where they look at, instead of seeking to cure the issue or prevent the issue at childhood, but perhaps seeking ways that we can get the truth of the matter out to the public and dispel the myths and stuff like that. I really think it's also conferences like this that you're doing, Shae. So that this whole, getting the information out there in a really accessible way, and what better way than webinars, honestly. But yeah, that's my sort of 2 cents. But programs, we need programs, particularly for dyslexia.
Thank you, Autumn. We are working frantically behind the scenes to get those programs implemented and out and into the big wide world. And some of that work is with your organisation as well, Autumn. So thank you.
Maybe just if somebody trusts you information about themselves, if they disclose that they are neurodivergent, take some time to learn a little bit about the disability. But remember that you're working with an individual, and that we all come with our own experiences, backgrounds, education. There'll be similarities to the text because we have the diagnosis, but find out what we need as individuals and what supports would help us. Please read blogs, look at YouTube videos, look at lived experiences, talk to adults who are neurodivergent, because we are the experts in our own lives and we can share a lot of information with you.
Absolutely. And I think just knowing too whether or not you're a person seeking to, I guess, educate your own organisation about your own needs, or a manager or team leader looking to see what you can better do to support your employees or students. Knowing that a lot of the changes that will be made to accommodate people with any kind of neurodivergence will actually usually help everyone, regardless of whether or not they're dyslexic, they're ADHD or autistic, are neurotypical, have mental health conditions, a whole lot of things. So often these accommodations are so small but can have a huge impact on people and their ability to thrive in the workplace. So yeah, I think having these discussions, if you're comfortable, can be a really great start, but often those changes can have a huge impact.
Well, thank you so much, ladies. It was such a privilege and honour to talk to you all again.
If you'd like to learn more about our guest speakers or about ADSET, head to deardyslexic.com. And if you love our podcast, then why not sponsor one today? Find out more at deardyslexic.com. And if you haven't done so yet, make sure you sign up to our mailing list so you can keep up to date with everything we're doing, including our advocacy and awareness work, peer support programs, research, and the D-Hub, our digital learning platform for all your needs. If you love this podcast, well, why not sponsor one today? To find out more, head to deardyslexic.com.